The Egyptian exhibit was closing in 30 minutes, and Olivia Reed was making her final rounds through the hushed gallery. As the museum's newest curator, she took pride in the meticulous arrangement of artifacts dating back thousands of years. The soft lighting highlighted the delicate hieroglyphics on a particularly rare papyrus scroll, her personal favorite piece in the collection. Fascinating, isn't it? How something so fragile can endure for millennia. The voice startled her. Visitors usually didn't venture into this section so late. She turned to find herself facing a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit. His dark eyes carried an intensity that made her momentarily forget her rehearsed curator speech. "It is," she replied, regaining her composure. "This particular scroll contains funeral rites rarely seen outside of royal tombs. The preservation quality suggests it belonged to someone of considerable importance. Someone who believed their legacy would outlast time itself," he said, stepping closer to examine the glass case. "I'm Julian Blackwood." The name registered immediately. The Blackwoods weren't just wealthy. They were institution builders. Their name adorned hospital wings, university halls, and coincidentally, the east wing of this very museum. "Olivia Reed, I'm the curator for this exhibit." "I know," he smiled. "My mother sits on the board." She mentioned a brilliant new addition to the antiquities department. "I came to see if her assessment was accurate." "And?" Olivia raised an eyebrow, inexplicably, drawn to his confident demeanor. "She undersold you." 3 days later, he sent a delivery to her office, a first edition of Ancient Egyptian Funerary Practices she had mentioned during their conversation. A week after that, they were having dinner at Lumiere, where reservations typically required. Months of waiting. By the end of the month, Olivia found herself thoroughly enchanted by Julian Blackwood. Their courtship was a whirlwind of private museum tours after hours, weekend trips to coastal art galleries, and intimate dinners where they'd talk until the restaurants emptied around them. Julian listened to her theories about historical preservation with genuine interest, something her previous boyfriends had merely tolerated. "You see the world through a historian's eyes," he told her one evening as they stood on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city lights. "You understand that everything we build is just another layer in humanity's story." When he proposed after only 6 months, Olivia barely hesitated. The ring in emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires felt substantial against her finger, a physical manifestation of the future he promised. "My parents want to meet you properly," Julian said as they celebrated with champagne. "Now that you'll be a Blackwood." Eleanor Blackwood's estate sprawled across 5 acres of meticulously landscaped gardens. The colonial-style mansion loomed like a museum piece itself, pristine, imposing, and faintly unwelcoming. Olivia smoothed her dress nervously as Julian guided her through the massive double doors. "Darling, you've arrived." Eleanor Blackwood glided toward them, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, pearls gleaming at her throat. She air-kissed Julian's cheeks before turning her attention to Olivia. "And this is the museum girl. Mother, this is my fiancée, Olivia Reed." "How lovely." Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes as she assessed Olivia from head to toe. "What an interesting choice of dress for dinner." Olivia felt her confidence waver. She'd selected her favorite emerald cocktail dress specifically for this occasion, thinking it elegant enough for meeting Julian's family. "Let's not stand in the foyer all evening." Harrison Blackwood appeared beside his wife, his handshake firm and businesslike. "Dinner is served." Throughout the four-course meal, Olivia felt increasingly like an artifact under examination. Eleanor's questions carried subtle barbs beneath their polite veneer. "Curator work, is that a sustainable career?" "I imagine the pay must be ... modest." "The preservation of history has immeasurable value," Olivia replied carefully. "Of course. Dear, values are important when one lacks ... other resources." Julian squeezed her hand under the table, but offered no defense. Instead, he steered the conversation towards safer topics: the museum's upcoming fundraiser, the Blackwood Foundation's latest philanthropic ventures. Later that night, in Julian's car, Olivia finally voiced her concerns. "Your mother doesn't approve." "Of me?" "She's protective," Julian sighed. "The Blackwood name comes with certain expectations. She'll warm up once she knows you better." But as wedding preparations began, Eleanor's protectiveness manifested as interference. She insisted on attending every vendor meeting, overruling Olivia's choices with dismissive efficiency. "Peonies are so common, dear. The Blackwoods always use orchids. That venue simply won't accommodate our guest list. We've reserved the Grand Hall instead. That dress designer is ... quaint. I've scheduled appointments with proper ateliers." Gradually, the wedding Olivia had envisioned transformed into Eleanor's production. Julian remained frustratingly neutral, claiming he wanted peace between the women in his life. "It's just one day," he would say when Olivia expressed frustration. "What matters is our life together afterward." But as their wedding day approached, Olivia couldn't ignore the growing unease in her stomach. Historians' instinct that something in this perfect narrative didn't align with the evidence before her. The question was whether she would heed the warning before it was too late. 3 months before the wedding, Olivia sat in her office, staring at an apologetic email from their chosen caterer. Due to an unexpected scheduling conflict, they would no longer be able to service the Blackwood Reed wedding. It marked the 5th vendor cancellation in 2 weeks. "This doesn't make sense," Olivia muttered, reaching for her phone to call Julian. "Sweetheart, these things happen," he assured her, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Mother has already found replacements. The Blackwoods have connections that can solve any problem." Any problem except the growing distance between them, Olivia thought as she ended the call. Julian had been working late consistently, leaving her to handle wedding details alone, or worse, with Eleanor. That afternoon, a floral designer called. In tears, "Ms. Reed, I'm so sorry. I received explicit instructions that your arrangements were to be changed to all white. When I contacted Mr. Blackwood to confirm—" "Wait," Olivia interrupted. "Julian contacted you directly?" "No, ma'am. It was Mrs. Blackwood. She said she was calling on her son's behalf because you were too overwhelmed to make proper decisions." The revelation stung like a paper cut small, but surprisingly painful. Olivia had specifically chosen vibrant blues and purples to complement the museum's architecture where their reception would be held. Julian knew this. They had discussed it at length. "Did you make the changes?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Blackwood was very insistent. She mentioned your ... background might not prepare you for understanding appropriate wedding aesthetics." Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks. "My background? I shouldn't say more. I've already overstepped. Again, my apologies." Olivia spent the evening examining every wedding decision that had been altered. The elegant, scholarly celebration she'd planned had morphed into a society spectacle meant to impress the Blackwood circle rather than reflect her relationship with Julian. When she confronted him that night, his dismissal was immediate. "Mother is being helpful, Liv. She's done this before her own wedding, her friends' celebrations. We should be grateful." "Grateful that she's calling vendors behind my back? Implying I'm incompetent because I didn't grow up with a silver spoon?" Julian's expression hardened. "You're exaggerating. This stress is making you paranoid." "Paranoid?" The word hung between them like a judgment. "Yes, paranoid. These vendors are professionals who juggle multiple events. Sometimes schedules conflict. Sometimes miscommunications happen. Not everything is a conspiracy against you." 2 months before the wedding, Olivia's best friend Naomi invited her for coffee. As the only child of middle-class parents, Olivia had few people in her corner who understood the pressure of marrying into old money. "You look exhausted," Naomi observed, sliding a latte across the table. "Is it the wedding or the monster-in-law?" "Both," Olivia admitted. "Something feels wrong now. The vendors, Julian's sudden distance, Eleanor's constant presence. It's like I'm being systematically removed from my own wedding." "Have you checked Julian's phone?" Naomi asked bluntly. "What? No. I trust him. Do you? Because the Julian who proposed to you wouldn't let his mother railroad your entire wedding." The suggestion lingered uncomfortably. That night, while Julian showered, Olivia found herself staring at his phone on the nightstand. The notification. Screen showed an email preview from Eleanor. "Adjustments to seating complete." She won't know. Her heart racing, Olivia picked up the phone. Julian's password was her birthday, a detail that had once seemed romantic but now felt calculated. The full email loaded. "Adjustments to seating complete." She won't notice until it's too late that her side will look embarrassingly empty compared to ours. "Harrison says this should provide excellent leverage for the prenup conversation next week." Prenup conversation? Julian had never mentioned a prenuptial agreement. Scrolling further, she found dozens of exchanges between Julian and his parents about managing Olivia's expectations and ensuring Blackwood traditions take precedence. But the most damning evidence appeared in a group chat labeled Operation Museum Acquisition. There Julian, Eleanor, and Harrison openly discussed their strategy. Eleanor: "The girl clearly thinks she's marrying into our world permanently. She needs to understand her position." Harrison: "Julian, your grandfather's terms were clear. You must be married before your 30th birthday to access your trust fund. This curator is presentable enough for the ceremony, but remember our discussion about the exit strategy." Julian: "Don't worry. I've kept detailed records of her difficult behavior. After we secure the trust, the divorce will be clean and cost-effective." Olivia's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. The Blackwoods weren't just controlling her wedding. They were orchestrating a temporary marriage for Julian to access his inheritance. She was nothing more than a convenient acquisition with an already planned disposal date. When Julian emerged from the bathroom, Olivia had composed herself enough to place his phone exactly where it had been. That night, she lay beside him, her mind racing through options. Confronting him would only alert the Blackwoods that she knew. Calling off the wedding immediately would mean losing the chance to understand the full scope of their deception. Instead, she texted Naomi, "You were right. I need help." 1 month before the wedding, Olivia began her own operation. She scheduled coffee with the wedding planner. Eleanor had insisted upon a nervous woman named Penelope who clearly feared the Blackwood matriarch. "I know Eleanor has been giving you separate instructions," Olivia said gently. "I'm not angry. I just need to understand what's happening." Penelope's professional facade crumbled. "Mrs. Blackwood said you wouldn't notice, that you were distracted by your work and social inadequacies." "And Julian? What has he said?" Mr. Blackwood defers to his mother entirely. He signed off on all her changes, including the last-minute venue switch. Last-minute venue switch? Olivia's stomach dropped. "What venue switch?" Penelope blanched. "The museum reception. Mrs. Blackwood canceled it yesterday. The new venue is the Blackwood estate. She said it was your joint decision to honor family tradition." That night, Julian arrived home to find Olivia surrounded by wedding magazines, smiling brightly. "I was just reviewing our plans. Your mother mentioned moving the reception to your family estate." "What a wonderful idea." The relief on his face confirmed everything. "I'm glad you agree, sweetheart. It means so much to my family." "Of course," she replied, her voice honey-sweet, while her heart hardened like amber, preserving the pain to fuel. What would come next? After all, family is everything. On the morning of her wedding, Olivia woke in the luxurious suite Eleanor had insisted she use at the Blackwood estate. Naomi arrived early, carrying coffee and a determined expression. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, careful not to. Alert the makeup artist, Eleanor had selected a woman who had arrived with specific instructions to make Olivia look appropriately sophisticated. "Completely," Olivia replied. "Everything is in place." The day unfolded exactly as Eleanor had orchestrated. The ceremony was scheduled at the Blackwood family's private chapel, a Gothic structure that had witnessed generations of strategic marriages. Guests began arriving, hundreds of people Olivia had never met, influential figures whose presence served the Blackwood image rather than celebrating any actual relationship. Her wedding dress, selected by Eleanor after dismissing Olivia's choice as unsuitably bohemian, felt like a costume. The heavy satin and restrictive bodice were nothing like the flowing, Art Deco-inspired gown she'd originally chosen. "Mrs. Blackwood wants you to wear the family pearls," a stern-faced assistant announced, entering the suite with a velvet box. "They've adorned every Blackwood bride for 5 generations." "How lovely," Olivia smiled, accepting the necklace while catching Naomi's eye in the mirror. "I'm honored." As the hour approached, Eleanor swept into the suite for a final inspection. Her critical gaze assessed Olivia from every angle. "Acceptable," she pronounced finally, "though your posture could use improvement. Blackwood brides stand with proper deportment." "I'll do my best to represent the family well," Olivia replied demurely. Eleanor's lips thinned with satisfaction. "See that you do. Julian has made quite the sacrifice to secure his future." The deliberate cruelty of the statement hung in the air after Eleanor departed. Naomi squeezed Olivia's hand. "That woman is pure poison, and about to receive a strong dose of her own medicine," Olivia murmured. The ceremony began with orchestral grandeur. Olivia walked down the aisle alone, another of Eleanor's manipulations. Having scheduled the wedding during her parents' long-planned anniversary cruise and forgotten to adjust the date when informed of the conflict, Julian waited at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, the picture of a devoted groom. Only Olivia could see the calculation behind his smile, the subtle check of his watch that revealed his true priorities. The minister began the service with practiced solemnity. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today, ... Olivia let the familiar words wash over her as she scanned the audience. Eleanor and Harrison sat in the front row, their expressions smug with victory. Behind them were rows of distinguished guests, business associates, political connections, and social elites whose presence would be reported in tomorrow's society pages. Just as the minister reached the vows, Olivia's phone chimed loudly, a deliberate breach of wedding etiquette that caused Eleanor to stiffen with disapproval. "I'm so sorry," Olivia said, her voice carrying clearly through the chapel, "but I believe this is important." She retrieved her phone from a hidden pocket, noting Julian's confused frown. The entire assembly watched in stunned silence as she checked the screen. "Just as I thought," she announced, her curator's voice projecting effortlessly. "Perfect timing." "Olivia," Julian hissed, "what are you doing?" She turned to face the guests, rather than her groom. "I want to thank you all for coming today. It's important to have witnesses when unveiling significant historical findings." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eleanor half rose from her seat, her face darkening with fury. "As a curator, my job is to authenticate artifacts and separate genuine articles from clever forgeries," Olivia continued. "The Blackwood family presents a fascinating case study." She nodded to Naomi, who pressed a button on her phone. The chapel's projection system, installed for displaying romantic montages during receptions, flickered to life. Instead of loving photos, the screen displayed the damning text conversations Olivia had discovered. "For those in the back who?" Can't read the screen clearly. Allow me to summarize. Olivia continued, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. Julian Blackwood needed to be married by his 30th birthday to access his trust fund. I was selected as a convenient acquisition presentable enough for photographs, but easily discarded after the financial transaction was complete. Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the chapel. Julian lunged for Olivia's arm, but she stepped nimbly aside. "The evidence continues," she said, as Naomi advanced to the next screen emails between Eleanor and various vendors, explicitly instructing them to ignore the bride's wishes and implement the Blackwood directives instead. "Olivia, stop this." "Immediately," Julian demanded, his charming facade crumbling. "Why? I'm simply following the Blackwood tradition of prioritizing financial gain over human decency." Eleanor stormed down the aisle, her carefully maintained composure shattered. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done to me," Olivia corrected. "And we haven't even reached the most interesting artifacts yet." The next slide revealed the prenuptial agreement. Julian had planned to present after the ceremony a document that would have entitled Olivia to nothing in the divorce they had already planned for 6 months after the wedding. "You ungrateful little nobody," Eleanor spat. "You're nothing without the Blackwood name." "Actually," Olivia replied calmly, "I've recently been offered a prestigious position curating the National Museum's New Antiquities Wing of Position. I initially declined, because Julian insisted I focus on being a proper Blackwood wife." She turned to the stunned audience. "A career sacrifice that was apparently unnecessary since my employment expiration date was already scheduled." Harrison Blackwood finally intervened, his legal mind calculating damage control. "This is a private, family matter. I must ask our guests to—" "Oh, but I've saved the most valuable artifacts for last," Olivia interrupted. "Naomi?" The final slides appeared financial documents, offshore account numbers, and emails that implicated Harrison Blackwood in a complex tax evasion scheme involving the family's charitable foundation. "As a curator, I understand the importance of provenance," Olivia said, addressing the shocked assembly. "These documents were legally obtained through public records and electronic communications sent to my devices. Copies have been provided to the appropriate authorities, who should be arriving momentarily." As if on cue, the chapel doors opened to reveal several serious-faced individuals in suits, representatives from the financial crimes division Olivia had contacted the previous week. "Mr. Blackwood," one of them called, "we have some questions regarding the Foundation's financial disclosures." The perfect Blackwood wedding dissolved into chaos. Guests hurried out, eager to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal. Julian stood frozen at the altar, his carefully constructed future crumbling around him. Olivia approached him one last time, removing the heavy pearl necklace and placing it in his hand. "Consider this my wedding gift, a reminder that some acquisitions can't be purchased, controlled, or disposed of according to a convenient timetable." She walked down the aisle alone, head high, leaving behind the gilded cage they had constructed for her. Outside, away from the flashing police lights and murmuring crowd, Naomi waited with a getaway car. "That," Naomi said as they drove away, "from the Blackwood estate, was the most spectacular thing I've ever witnessed." Olivia leaned back in her seat, exhaustion and relief washing over her in equal measure. "I learned from the best. The Blackwoods taught me everything about calculating. The perfect downfall." The modest apartment Olivia had maintained despite Julian's insistence on moving into his penthouse became her sanctuary in the weeks following the wedding disaster. The blinds remained drawn, her phone switched to silent mode as news outlets, and gossip columns buzzed with details of the Blackwood scandal. "Society wedding exposes financial fraud," screamed one headline. "Blackwood heir left at altar as family empire crumbles," declared another. Naomi arrived each morning with coffee and bagels, a lifeline to the outside world that Olivia wasn't quite ready to rejoin. The museum board called again, Naomi announced, setting down breakfast on the cluttered coffee table. They're still holding the curator position for you. Olivia nodded absently, her attention fixed on her laptop screen. I'll call them tomorrow. You've said that every day for 2 weeks. Naomi sighed, clearing away yesterday's untouched meal. The Blackwoods are facing federal charges. Julian's been photographed fleeing to the Cayman Islands, and Eleanor has reportedly checked into a wellness retreat in Switzerland. You won. It's over. No, Olivia replied, her voice quiet but firm. It's not over until I understand everything. The wedding day revelations had been merely the opening salvo, a defensive move to escape the trap set for her. But as Olivia recovered from the emotional whiplash of betrayal, her curator's instinct for thorough investigation had awakened with renewed purpose. The Blackwoods had spent generations building their reputation and fortune. The tax evasion scheme Harrison had orchestrated was sophisticated enough to suggest it wasn't their first foray into financial impropriety. There had to be more older secrets buried beneath the family's polished facade. I need access to historical property records, Olivia muttered, more to herself than to Naomi. The Blackwood estate was built in 1897, but their wealth predates that by decades. Liv, Naomi's voice softened with concern. Maybe it's time to move forward instead of digging deeper into their past. Olivia finally looked up from her screen. Do you know what Julian told me when he proposed? He said I see the world through a historian's eyes, but I understand how each generation builds upon the foundations left by those before them. He meant it as flattery, but he was right. She turned her laptop to show Naomi a series of newspaper clippings from the 1880s. The original Blackwood fortune came from railroad investments, but the family appeared suddenly in high society with no clear origin. Their narrative about old family money from Europe is fabricated. So they're social climbers from way back. Is that worth sacrificing your healing process? This isn't about vengeance anymore, Olivia explained, her eyes brightening, with the familiar enthusiasm that emerged whenever she discussed historical research. It's about truth. The Blackwoods didn't just try to use me. They've been using a carefully constructed mythology to manipulate society for generations. The following day, Olivia showered, dressed professionally for the first time since the wedding debacle, and visited the city archives. As a respected academic, she gained access to historical documents, rarely viewed by the public. Hours turned into days as she pieced together the authentic Blackwood history. Thomas Blackwood, the family patriarch, hadn't been a European aristocrat, as family lore suggested, but a shrewd businessman who had acquired his initial capital through questionable means during the post-Civil War reconstruction. Land theft, Olivia whispered, tracing property transfers that showed how Thomas had manipulated vulnerable families who had lost their men in the war. Properties worth fortunes had been acquired for pennies through deception and occasionally outright. Intimidation. The pattern continued through generations, each Blackwood expanding the family wealth through methods that ranged from unethical to outright criminal, while simultaneously crafting a public image of refinement and philanthropy. Olivia created a detailed timeline, connecting historical records with contemporary evidence. The Blackwood Foundation, the family's primary vehicle for social legitimacy, had been established using profits from Prohibition-era bootlegging. Their prestigious art collection included pieces of questionable provenance that suggested wartime looting. When she finally returned to the museum to accept the curator position, Olivia had compiled enough research to fill a book or destroy a dynasty. Welcome back, Dr. Patterson, the museum director, greeted her warmly. We've been holding the antiquities position, but given your recent experiences, I wondered if you might consider a different opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Olivia asked cautiously. We're planning a new exhibition on American industrial dynasties, how they shaped our cultural and economic landscape. Your research skills would be invaluable, and your personal insights might bring a unique perspective. The irony wasn't lost on Olivia. You want me to curate an exhibit that could include the Blackwoods? Among others, Dr. Patterson nodded. The board feels it would be ... healing ... for you to transform your experience into educational content. Olivia considered the offer. The museum board, like most cultural institutions in the city, included powerful figures with connections to families like the Blackwoods. Their motives weren't entirely altruistic. Controlling the narrative around the scandal would benefit many of their associates. I accept, she said finally. On one condition: complete academic freedom. The exhibition must follow the evidence, wherever it leads. Dr. Patterson hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Historical accuracy is our primary mission, after all. That evening, Olivia called Naomi with renewed energy. I found my way forward, and it's through the past. The museum job? That's wonderful. It's more than a job, Olivia explained. It's an opportunity to tell the true story of families like the Blackwoods, how wealth and power in America have often been built on exploitation disguised as enterprise. The board approved this? Aren't they worried about alienating their donors? They don't know exactly what I've uncovered, Olivia admitted, and they won't until the exhibition opens. By then, it will be too late to suppress the truth. Over the next 3 months, Olivia worked tirelessly. During the day, she conducted legitimate research through the museum's resources, interviewing historians and examining archived materials from multiple prominent families. At night, she continued her private investigation into the Blackwoods, uncovering connections that spanned continents and centuries. One particularly revealing discovery came from an elderly former housekeeper who had worked at the Blackwood estate for decades before being abruptly dismissed with a meager pension. Mrs. Eleanor has a hidden room, the woman confided after Olivia gained her trust. Behind the library. Shelves. That's where Mr. Harrison keeps the real family records, the ones that don't match the story they tell at charity galas. With this information, Olivia carefully planned her next move. The Blackwood estate had been temporarily seized during the ongoing financial investigation, but the family's attorneys had negotiated limited access for retrieving personal items. I need to see the estate, Olivia told Naomi. The physical evidence. Is there documents they would never digitize or store where others might find them? That's breaking and entering, Naomi protested. Not if I have permission, Olivia replied, a small smile playing at her lips. And as Julian's technically still legal fiancé, since we never completed the ceremony, I might reasonably need to collect my belongings. One careful phone call to the federal investigator handling the Blackwood case was all it took. Olivia explained that she had left personal research materials in the library during her brief residence at the estate, given her status as a victim. In the case, the investigator was sympathetic. 2 days later, Olivia stood in the Blackwood Library, escorted by a federal agent who waited patiently by the door as she gathered her personal effects. With practiced efficiency, she located the hidden mechanism the housekeeper had described, a specific volume of Shakespeare that, when tilted, revealed a concealed button. The bookshelf swung silently inward, revealing a small room lined with filing cabinets and a vintage safe. Using the combination she had deduced from her research, the date of Thomas Blackwood's first questionable land acquisition, she opened the safe to find exactly what she had anticipated, the authentic Blackwood. Family ledgers, meticulously documenting generations of financial maneuvers too questionable to record in official books. Found what you needed? The agent asked as Olivia emerged with a box of materials. Yes, she replied truthfully. Everything I need to complete my research. As she left the estate for the final time, Olivia felt no triumph, only a historian's satisfaction at uncovering long-buried truths. The exhibition would not be her revenge. It would be her contribution to a more accurate understanding of how power and wealth had truly been distributed throughout American history. The Blackwoods were merely one case study in a larger pattern. Their downfall, not a personal victory, but a necessary correction to a narrative that had gone unchallenged for too long. 6 months after the wedding that never was, the museum's grand hall buzzed with anticipation. Foundations of Fortune, the hidden history of American dynasties, had generated unprecedented interest, with advance tickets sold out for the opening. Olivia adjusted her simple black dress elegant but understated, allowing her work to command attention rather than her appearance. Gone were the insecurities that had once made her vulnerable to Julian's manipulations. In their place stood a woman whose confidence derived from something far more substantial than social approval. Nervous? Naomi asked, appearing at her side, with 2 champagne flutes. Surprisingly, no, Olivia replied, accepting the drink. The research speaks for itself. The exhibition had been designed as a journey through American wealth creation, starting with the post-Civil War industrial boom and continuing to present-day corporate empires. Each section featured a prominent family, documenting both their public philanthropic efforts and the less savory methods that had built their initial fortunes. The Blackwood family occupied a significant but not dominant portion of the exhibit, exactly as Olivia had planned. This wasn't about personal vendetta, but historical accuracy. Dr. Patterson approached, his expression a mixture of admiration and apprehension. The board members are arriving. Several have expressed ... concerns about the exhibition's content. The content has been thoroughly vetted by our historical research team, Olivia replied calmly. Every document is authenticated, every conclusion supported by multiple sources. Yes, well, he cleared his throat, the Whitfield family has already threatened to withdraw their annual donation. The connections you've drawn between their shipping empire and prohibition smuggling are rather explicit. Because they're explicitly documented, Olivia countered. Would you prefer we perpetuate comfortable mythologies or present historical truth? Before he could answer, the museum doors opened to admit the evening's VIP guests. Board members, major donors, and prominent figures from the city's elite circles filed in, their curiosity overcoming any reservations about attending an event that promised to scrutinize their own class. Olivia moved through the crowd, providing context and answering questions with professional detachment. Near the Blackwood display, she overheard whispered conversations. Is that her? The one who is engaged to Julian Blackwood? I heard she orchestrated the whole federal investigation. Apparently, the family's still fighting extradition. She ignored the gossip, focusing instead on guests genuinely interested in the historical content. A distinguished older gentleman studying the documentation of Thomas Blackwood's land acquisitions caught her attention. Remarkable research, he commented as she approached. You've connected sources most historians would overlook. Thank you, Olivia replied. The challenge was synthesizing material deliberately scattered to obscure the pattern. Indeed, he extended his hand. Professor Daniel Thornton. I teach economic history at the university. Your work on industrial monopolies was invaluable to this exhibition, Olivia acknowledged. Your analysis of how family narratives are constructed to legitimize wealth accumulation provided our theoretical framework. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Eleanor Blackwood, thinner and paler than Olivia, remembered but still emanating imperious energy, swept into the hall. Despite the pending charges and social disgrace, she had evidently decided to confront the exhibition directly. Ms. Reed, Eleanor's voice carried across the room as she approached, silencing nearby conversations. I see you found a way to. Monetize your bitterness. Olivia maintained her professional composure. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm surprised to see you here. I understood you were still in Switzerland. I returned to address certain legal matters, Eleanor replied coldly. And two, witness firsthand how you've chosen to distort my family's legacy. The exhibition presents documented facts. If you find those facts distressing, perhaps your issue is with the actions themselves rather than their documentation. Eleanor's gaze swept dismissively over the displays. Cherry-picked half-truths presented without context. My attorneys will be reviewing this material carefully for defamation. Everything is sourced directly from your family's own records, Olivia said quietly, including the materials from the hidden room behind the library, the authentic ledgers that chronicle exactly how the Blackwood fortune was accumulated. Eleanor's face paled further. You had no right. Federal investigators authorized my access to collect personal items. The documents were in plain sight in a room I was legally permitted to enter. A small crowd had gathered around them, including several journalists invited to cover the exhibition opening. Eleanor, suddenly aware of the public nature of their confrontation, attempted to regain her composure. You've built your career on destroying my family. No, Mrs. Blackwood, your family built their fortune on destroying others. I've simply removed the velvet curtain that concealed the machinery. A flash of uncertainty crossed Eleanor's face, the first genuine emotion Olivia had ever witnessed from the woman. You don't understand what it takes to build something lasting. In this world, the compromises required. I understand perfectly, Olivia replied. I simply reject the notion that power justifies exploitation. Eleanor's response was cut short by the arrival of her attorney, who whispered urgently in her ear. With a final venomous glare at Olivia, she allowed herself to be escorted from the museum. Later, as the crowd thinned and the evening drew to a close, Olivia found herself alone in the exhibition hall. She walked slowly through the displays, not as their curator, but as someone completing a personal journey. The final section featured contemporary photographs of the properties Thomas Blackwood had acquired through manipulation, alongside images of the descendants of those original families. Many had never recovered from the loss of their ancestral lands and livelihoods. Planning your next project? Olivia turned to find Professor Thornton observing her thoughtfully. Actually, yes, she admitted. This exhibition documents how fortunes were built. I'm interested in exploring what was destroyed in the process, the communities and possibilities eliminated to create these dynasties. Ambitious, he nodded appreciatively. The history department at the university has been discussing the need for exactly such research. We have funding for a special fellowship position if you're interested. The offer was unexpected, but felt right, a natural evolution of the work she had begun. I'd like that very much, she replied as they discussed the details. Olivia's phone chimed with a news alert. Julian Blackwood apprehended in Cayman Islands, facing extradition on financial crimes charges. She silenced the notification without opening it. Julian's fate no longer defined her story. 3 years later, Olivia stood at a podium accepting a prestigious academic award for her book, Beneath the Foundations: The Hidden Costs of American Dynasties. The audience included historians, journalists, and even a few representatives from the families her research had examined. History is not merely about documenting what happened, she concluded her acceptance speech, but understanding the full context of those events, who benefited, who suffered, and how narratives are constructed to justify both outcomes. Only by acknowledging these complexities can we build a more honest relationship with our past, and perhaps a more equitable future. As applause filled the hall, Olivia caught sight of Naomi in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside her sat Thomas Ramsey, the university librarian who had become an unexpected source of support during Olivia's research, and eventually something more. Later that evening, As Thomas drove them home from the ceremony, he glanced at Olivia with admiration. "How does it feel, changing the historical narrative like that?" Olivia watched the city lights pass by, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here, from a curator enchanted by a charismatic heir to a respected historian who had rewritten the story of American wealth. "It feels like restoration," she said finally. "Not just of historical truth, but of personal value. The Blackwoods thought they could use me as a convenient prop in their family drama and discard me when I'd served my purpose." "Instead, you became the author of their true legacy," Thomas observed. "Not just theirs," Olivia corrected gently. "I became the author of my own story. That's the sweetest retribution of all reclaiming your narrative when others try to write you out of it." As they arrived home, a modest but beautiful house filled with books and artifacts from their travels, Olivia reflected on how differently her life had unfolded from the gilded cage the Blackwoods had prepared for her. Their dynasty had crumbled under the weight of its own corruption, while she had built something authentic and meaningful from the ruins of their deception. Eleanor had been right about one thing: building something lasting required compromises. But Olivia had compromised with circumstance, never with truth, and that had made all the difference.